Hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven, and our guest today is Karie Kaufmann, joining us from San Diego, sunny San Diego, as you can see behind her. Karie Kaufmann is a business coach who gets results. Since 2005, Karie has helped over 1,000 business owners and executives achieve their goals and take their business to the next level. So we'll have a chance to hear about some of Karie's work later. She says she lives what she teaches by putting family first, based on our philosophy that, and I love this, that being in business should give you more life, not suck the life out of you. So Karie, thank you for being here as a guest today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm excited to be here.
Well, good. I hope, I would predict being a guest here will give you more life and not suck the life out of you or your day. So we'll have a chance to talk more about the coaching and the work that you do with organizations. Karie's website is kariekaufmann.com. Now there's a couple potential spelling mistakes I'll warn people about. So Karie, if you can give them the correct spelling for first and last name.
I would never expect anybody to guess this. Karie is K-A-R-I-E. Kaufmann is K-A-U-F as in Frank, M-A-N-N. So kariekaufmann.com.
One F, two N's, and I'll make sure that we have the correct link in the show notes if somebody wants to just go click on that instead of typing that in. So, so Karie, to get things started as we normally do here, looking back at the work that you've done in your career, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
It's a good question. So when you and I first connected, I gave this a lot of thought, and to be honest, I don't have one of those amazing stories where I made a massive mistake and I lost it all and came back stronger. And I love those stories. They're so inspiring and helpful. And I was like, I wish I had something like that. But I'm guessing if your listeners are anything like the leaders that I work with, a majority of people don't live that way. A majority of us don't live on the fringe where we're, risking it all or making a catastrophic level mistake that you've really got to recover and dig yourself out. So I would consider myself to be more of a typical kind of entrepreneur that hopefully your listeners can kind of relate to in that way. Because my favorite mistake was a mistake of omission. It was a mistake because I thought everything was fine. I built my coaching practice that's now been 16 years and counting. And I was doing pretty well, right? Now, this mistake happened about almost 5 years ago, or at least the realization of a mistake that I had been slowly making and not realizing it. So by all measurements I was using at the time, business was going well. I had a successful practice. I have great clients. I was pretty full. I was turning away clients. And I did pretty well at maintaining what I thought was a decent balance. I've got young kids at home, so I've got my boundaries of where my time is spent to make sure that I'm not compromising. As I said, being in business should give you more life, not suck the life out of you. But I realized I had the illusion of balance, that I wasn't actually doing things the way I needed to. And what brought this to my attention was I have a friend who is also a coach, runs a practice along with his wife in New Mexico, and he had a medical emergency that put him in the hospital for several weeks, probably even longer actually, by the time he fully recovered. And so naturally his wife is out as well. They ran the business together, but they got two young boys, so she's looking after her husband and her kids, and obviously the business took a back burner. So I get a call from a mutual friend that said, hey, this couple, they've got all these clients. Have you got space? Would you mind looking after, coaching a couple of these businesses while he recovers and they can kind of get back on their feet? And I couldn't say yes. I had no margin in my business. I was so packed to the gills. I remember times when this is going to sound awful. I was thankful when one of my clients would call out sick. Like, sorry, I got to cancel the day's appointment. I'm and I'm like, whew, I got to get a break.
That's some time.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing something wrong. And while I thought I was doing everything right, I thought I was feeling rather successful and accomplished. But what I was really doing was continuing to grow my business by just doing more of what I already knew. by just kind of rinse and repeat, incremental growth based on really staying within my comfort zone, and then stretching it until, like a rubber band, it can't stretch anymore. And that's when I was like, that I'm doing this the wrong way. If I can't help a friend, if I can't help another business who needs it, let alone a business that's run by a friend. So that was a real wake-up call for me. And around that same time, I had taken on a new business coach for my business. I've had my own business coach for about as long as I've owned my business. But I was taking on a new coach at the time, and I had known him for quite a while. So he had seen my business grow and evolve, and he lives in London. So he said something to the effect of, "You're working below your potential. It's becoming inappropriate." And I have a terrible British accent. He also swears a lot. So, you can adapt my interpretation to get the impression that he sent to me. And that's exactly the message I needed at that point in time, was that I was staying within my comfort zone and trying to fit everything into the way I had always done things. And, well, if it worked for me in the past, I got to just, continue doing it this way. And it was... I had gone as far as I could go in my comfort zone. I'd helped as many people as I could help. And it was time to get uncomfortable. So that's my favorite mistake.
Well, and, Karie, I think, you're right. It is rare or unusual when guests on the podcast here have had, as you put it, like, a lose it all and build backstory. It's usually something, that's why the podcast, it would be a different podcast framed as my biggest mistake or my catastrophic mistake. But your mistake, I can see why you frame it as a favorite, because, it sounds like it, it's stuck with you. It's impacted you, from that discovery point, from the moment and the coaching you got. What sort of adjustments have you made, have you made in the years since? So
that prompted me to, do a few things. One was some education. Now, I've always been a fan of education. I'm constantly reading, learning, listening to podcasts, attending seminars. That's not new to me. What I realized, though, was I was learning more of what I already knew. Like, I was still learning within the areas that I liked. And the way I felt at the time was that it was time to learn things that made me tired. Like, you read that book and, like, you're just not ready for it, or it's so far outside of your wheelhouse that it's exhausting, mentally exhausting for you. And it was time to go there. It was time to learn the things that really, really wore me out and stretch myself in that level, which led to new language, new ways of speaking, new ways of working with my clients, and new types of clients, bigger companies that had more complex problems, a more complex strategy that was not a million miles away from what I had done, but was certainly outside of my comfort zone. So I just had to change my practice, and I realized, the asking myself higher quality questions with how can I continue to increase my impact without sacrificing the things that are important to me. The things outside of my business because my business is important to me too. It's my calling in life, but without sacrificing family health, spiritual health, any of those other things that also really matter to me in life.
So it sounds like, we've gotten sort of a second bonus mistake, the mistake within the mistake of, as you put it, learning more of what you already knew. That gets me thinking, I work within a particular professional niche. And for a long time, I read books that were like within a tightly defined box of being within that field. And then it gets to a point where, it's not that I don't have anything more to learn within that niche, but,
Sure.
As an engineer, I've found it very helpful to read books about psychology, which is outside of my usual professional space. But sometimes reading something like that brings in more, or allows me to connect dots in a way that's really helpful. What are some of the things that you've explored outside of, the things you already knew?
For one, I added a new certification to my wheelhouse, which is with Scaling Up, which is designed for mid-market size companies as opposed to the smaller businesses that I had been working with historically. So now I kind of do both. But that was new for me, new certification, hundreds of hours of study and practical application to get that certification, which also led to new conferences, new thought leaders, new books, new podcasts that challenged me, new even strategic alliances. Kind of my centers of influence started to shift, which is out of my comfort zone. I was used to being, I guess, pretty well connected and pretty well known in my circles, and now is moving to a place where nobody knew me or cared. Right?
Sure.
So that I felt frequently, and still sometimes do, even though I've been on this kind of next level journey for a few years now, still very much feel like a novice in some regards. And I kept telling my coach, I feel like such a rookie again. Man, I made a rookie mistake today, said or did, or missed something or did the wrong thing or just felt outside of my league. And that's really uncomfortable for people who like to be good at things. And I run into that a lot with my clients because they're smart people. Smart people generally like to be good at things and resist things where we're not good or where, you might look like an idiot. So that I think it was Seth Godin who said something like, growth by definition means you're not the expert. Right? Because you stepped beyond where your expertise ends. So if you don't like feeling like an idiot, you're going to resist growth. More likely subconsciously than consciously. Like consciously, we might say we want to grow. These are our goals. These are our plans. But we can also self-sabotage when it comes to, it's like, well, gosh, that's going to mean I'm going to have to hire some new people that are actually smarter than me at certain things. Or I'm going to have to let go of things that I've always been the best one at. And release some control. So those are certainly things I've had to do myself, and also things that my clients deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for somebody who is considered a coach or a quote unquote expert, even though like that word makes me cringe sometimes, but it's good to put yourself in a situation where you're now the learner or the novice, because I think it helps kind of build or refresh the empathy that we should have as coaches toward people. Absolutely. We're working with people who are new to something perhaps, and they may have that fear or trepidation of, see, I made a mistake trying to use a bigger word than I should have. they have fear of looking dumb or not being an expert. That is uncomfortable. I mean, how do you help coach clients of yours through those stages of learning and newness and quote unquote rookie mistakes, as you put it?
Well, something I remind them often and remind myself of often is the person you are today is perfectly equipped to run your current business. And that's it. And your business is designed to get its current results. And that's it. So if you're serious about leveling up, about really scaling the business to new heights, who's the leader you need to become? What kind of leader does it take to run a business that's 20% or 200% larger than the one you have now? So asking those kinds of questions and getting them to self-reflect on, okay, well, what will it look like to run a team that's double the size, or to manage higher level leaders, or to recruit people who are smarter than me, right? Or to manage people in multiple locations, and now these days in a hybrid working environment when that's maybe a skill I've never had to have anymore. And another question I pose to them often is, if you were to employ a CEO, because let me preface this, most of the businesses I work with are founder run. Sometimes there are multiple, maybe they change hands. I work with a lot of family businesses that might be multi-generational, but they're very closely held. The person running the business likely started it or has at least been there for a very long time. So it's very personal to them. So if I ask the question, if you were to employ a CEO from the outside, recruit someone to come in, pay them a hefty salary to do it, what would you expect of her or him? And how is that different from how you're showing up right now? Or in other words, if you had a board of directors, would they be wanting to give you a raise right now? Or would they be, maybe challenging you to improve on some things? And getting people to look at it outside of themselves with like, well, what would I expect to see of someone else? And what's the delta? What's the difference in how I'm showing up now, either in my thought process or my skill set, my leadership attributes, my strategic thinking. Most people don't take time to think, really. We're too busy doing, and not really taking the time to really strategically think. So that's something that I help them pause and reflect and ask the difficult questions that they usually can't answer. And if you can't answer a question right away, then that's usually the right question to be asking yourself, right? We tend to ask ourselves questions we already know the answer to. So if it's a question you can't answer, then you're probably on the right track.
Yeah, but I can see that's where the benefit of a coach, mentor, any outside perspective maybe helps somebody look beyond the here and the now. Like you said, we're so busy doing and executing, taking the time to look ahead can be a challenge. But it makes me think, Karie, kind of along the lines of, there's that old expression, physician, heal thyself. When you found yourself too busy to take on your friend's work, were you also sort of in that trap of being too busy doing the work to think about some of your longer term strategy yourself? Did freeing up time help you in kind of planning for your own business?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I had gotten into a bit of a rut. I guess you could say it was just too comfortable, and there's really only two reasons why people change: dissatisfaction, right? And vision, the carrot and the stick. But really, it's a combination of both of those. It's a multiplying factor, and anything times zero is zero. So you could be dissatisfied as all get out, but if you don't have a vision for what you want instead, or how things could be, or believe that it's possible, you're not going to take action. You're just going to live in frustration. And the reverse can also be true. You could have a grand vision or some big goals and aspirations, but if you're pretty comfortable as you are, you're unlikely to get off the couch, right? To get up and actually take the action. So I needed a little kick. I needed a healthy dose of dissatisfaction, and to clarify and increase my vision to, what I really wanted to achieve next, and how I was going to get there, and structure my learning according to where I wanted to go, not where I already was.
Mm-hmm. And then are there things that you've adjusted on in terms of, let's say, managing your calendar of, some people block out time for reflection, for thinking, for future projects, just some block of time that's not the 15 minutes that maybe you get between meetings. Do you manage your calendar differently to try to make sure you don't get too busy to think about those other things?
Yeah, I've limited the amount of coaching time I have on a weekly basis to make sure I have some significant time, what I call it my working on the business time, which is sometimes, I've got a great little outdoor office space outside my office here. So sometimes it's just me sitting out there with a notebook, right, where I'm thinking or strategizing or planning or journaling, talking with my coach. So, and other times it might be working on a project, right, or working on, marketing or something like that. But I've got a minimum of a half day a week that I spend for that, oftentimes more, especially if there's, kind of a bigger project that I'm working on at the moment. And that was a big shift for me to limit my calendar, which meant I had to make some adjustments, raise some prices, shift some of the clients I'm working with, doing different types of work to make sure that I could continue to grow without, like I said, giving up too much or when you run out of time, you run out of your ability to grow, right? And that's the trap that I needed to escape.
Yeah. And, there was a phrase on your website that jumped out at me, kind of building on what we've been talking about here, the idea or the suggestion to retire the lack of time excuse. Like, the one other thing I would add, I forget where I learned this, but this general idea of, if you say, I'm too busy to do blank, what you really could be saying is, doing blank isn't important enough. I choose not to make time to do blank, which is, it's more blunt, maybe more accurate. What else would you add about this whole idea of, quote unquote, I've got a lack of time?
I think people wear busy like it's a badge of honor. Right? It's like, how you doing? Oh, so busy, right? Yeah. And like that makes us more important or more valuable, and it's not. I've tried really hard, even though there are times that busy might be an accurate description. I don't want that to define my day or my life. Maybe you got a full calendar, maybe, you got some priorities, but it's a mentality where I don't want to be in that kind of harried, frantic, there's not enough time. It's a scarcity type of mentality. So I tell it to my clients, not a badge of honor. Like, I'm not impressed by that. I'll be impressed when you grow your business and you get to make it home in time for dinner. That's what's going to impress me. So how can we get there? And everybody can improve on it. It was Darren Hardy I heard speak. I've heard him speak a number of times, but I think the first time was 2012 or 13. And there's an audience of, I don't know, 1,000 people or so. And he says, how many here have been bit by an elephant? And no hands go up, but he's kind of like looking around. He said, how many here have been bit by a mosquito? And every hand in the room goes up. Mm-hmm. He's like, you see, the big things, we see them coming and we tend to avoid them. It's the small things that get you, right? Like, chances are you're not making a huge mistake when it comes to your time or, how you're prioritizing your day or your week. Like, you're not losing massive amounts of time scrolling social media or twiddling your thumbs. Like, it's the little things. It's the 5-minute things. And the things with mosquitoes is you don't know you've been bit until it's gone, right? It's hindsight at the end of the day that you're like, man, I was busy today, but what did I actually accomplish? Like, in reflection, you're like, gosh, I just wasted a bunch of time with these mosquitoes that, like, it felt urgent, but looking back, it wasn't important. And I just let it get squandered through. And it happens 2 minutes at a time, 5 minutes at a time. It's that one little distraction. It's that, hey, got a minute. It's that interruption. Yeah. So if you can just be intentional to be aware of those and eliminate, like, most people, I think, could buy back big chunks of their day, at least 20, 30 minutes a day, if not sometimes a couple hours, if you just look for where are you losing 3 to 5 minutes at a time. Mm-hmm. And eliminate some of that nonsense. Recognize the urgent but unimportant, before it's too late, because you look back and you say, well, okay, it wasn't as important as it seemed. Chances are it would have resolved itself if I had let it go. That's my advice on that.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And it kind of triggers a thought of, you're right. People do brag about how busy they are. They brag about how many hours they work. They brag about how little sleep they get. Like, how interesting it would be if somebody bragged about their effectiveness.
Right.
Like, oh, how you doing? Oh, great. Because I found there's this work that I've been doing. Like, I decided to outsource that to an assistant, and now that's freed up time in my day. Like, mm-hmm. Or I've decided I should stop doing such and such. Like, that would be a different, maybe helpful thing to hear people brag about something.
Yeah, that'd be a great thing to start celebrating.
One other thing to celebrate, as you put it on your website, there's a phrase that reminded me of kind of the themes of this podcast, that you help people collect experiences and how to learn from them. Mm-hmm. That includes learning from mistakes, these collection of mosquito bites, small mistakes. Could you add some more thoughts about what that phrase means to you, collecting experiences and learning from them?
Yeah, I stole that from Jim Rohn, who said life is a collection of experiences. And we first adopted that as one of our family core values. We have 4 family core values, and that's one of them. And then as I was kind of refining my business core values, that came to light again, because it's so true. Like, you either win or you learn. And if you just imagine that every challenge you face was sent to you as a gift, what did it come to teach you? Because at least in my life, and probably everybody's, like, you tend to have the patterns, right? The same mistake kind of shows up over and over and over because it's a pattern, and it might show up a little bit differently. You might not really recognize it as being the same thing, but if you really drill down to the core, to the root cause of what's causing your biggest headaches or challenges, it's probably really 1 or 2 things. So Earth is round, right? If you don't solve it, it's only a matter of time before you run into yourself again. So if you take note of it and you say, okay, now whatever it was that happened, if I just imagine this was sent to me as a gift, what did it come to teach me? And if I can learn the lesson, I don't have to face it again. I can apply it. And an exercise I've done with my clients sometimes is, look back in history of your, the last, however far you can remember of your business, some of the biggest mistakes you had and what you learned from it. And now in hindsight, can you see how like how that's affected where you are now. And in every single case, they say, I probably wouldn't be where I am now had I not had that not been a stepping stone, because it caused them to make a change. They learned a lesson, whatever it was. So, what if we did that more proactively, where on a regular basis we're saying like, okay, screwed that one up. What can it, might as well get some education out of it. Might as well make it worth the heartache.
Yeah.
To get the lesson and the education. And so that's to me what that experience is about. Partially, the other part of the experiences, at least the version that you saw on my website, collect experiences and learn from them, is that because I do believe being in business should give you more life and not suck the life out of you, that we really are intentional to treasure experiences, which also means celebrating successes, enjoying the simple pleasures of life or the finer pleasures of life and everything in between. Because most high performance people really suck at celebration, or it doesn't come natural. Always on to the next thing, right? You're just like, forget about the massive thing I just accomplished. There's 10 other things I haven't done yet. On to the next thing, on to the next thing. So I try to get people to really slow down and say, well, what has been your biggest success for the week, for the month, for the quarter? And force them to answer the question. And they'll usually at first say like, oh, I don't know. And they're like, well, there is that one thing. And that was kind of a big deal, but it happened like a week ago and I've already moved on. Just today I texted a client because I knew she was close to having her best year ever. So she's just as of a couple days ago, broke her previous annual revenue goal, right? And it's only, not even into September yet. So she's way ahead of schedule, already had her best year ever, and she's still got a few months to go. So I knew it was coming close. So I texted her to say, hey, did you hit it? She's like, oh yeah, we just passed it a couple days ago. And I said, so what are you doing to celebrate? She's like, I haven't even thought about that. It's like, well, consider this your reminder.
Yeah.
That's worth memorializing. You celebrate what you want more of. Focus on what you do want.
And avoid the trap of being too busy to take time to stop and smell the roses, as the cliched expression says. I think, there's some really good advice. Those of us who are driven are sometimes thinking about the next challenge or the gap or the thing that we need to improve on. I think I'm kind of wired that way. So I'll step back and think about that a little bit. But one other question before we wrap up, and again, our guest has been Karie Kaufmann. You can learn more about her coaching and her other work at kariekaufmann.com. The link and the spelling is in the show notes. One thing I learned a little bit about Karie through her website is about Karie's family. And you talk about the emphasis on family, how important that is to you. And earlier you mentioned work-life balance. So maybe as a final question, is that something that you've always been able to make a priority, or was there a point where you realized, I need to make an adjustment and emphasize that even more so?
I've certainly never done it perfectly. But I guess this could be another mistake or lesson I learned early on, as I've had this business longer than I've had my kids, right? So I used to be free to work around the clock. And I was pregnant with my first child, who's now 11. And I remember working late one night. I'm sitting on the couch with my husband with my laptop open, and I'm like 6 or 7 months pregnant at the time. And I just started crying. I was like, I am so busy, right? How am I going to fit a baby into my life when I'm up until 11 o'clock at night? I was trying to get my business off the ground at that point in time. And I just really had to find smarter ways of working. So that's when I hired my first employee, when I started delegating and started prioritizing my time. So I learned a lot from that. So I did make a commitment pretty early on. When she was born, I started taking off Friday afternoons. It's like, that's my, be home in time for dinner. And Friday afternoons was our mommy-daughter time. And then I had my second child and did that with both of them. And then after a little while, we had a nanny as well. So after a while, I was like, I'm paying a nanny who's not working now, right? Even though I'm paying her on Friday afternoons, like, maybe I should go on a date with my husband instead and leave the kids with the nanny. So that's been our tradition for the past, my son's 8. So, about that long is Friday afternoons are our date afternoons. Most Fridays, occasionally we'll one of us will have something going on that prevents that, but pretty consistently for several years, we've made sure that we have, our time as a couple. And then, because of one of our family core values is we collect experiences, that we're pretty intentional, even though we both work full time, but to really collect experiences and make memories with the family. And that's one thing we don't hesitate on. If it's a decision of, it's not a decision of stuff, it's a decision of experiences. Like if we've got an opportunity to create an experience, the answer is almost always yes. We're going to do it. Or if it's a sacrifice, we're going to do it because that's what we value.
Well, it's great advice, and thank you for sharing, some of your story and your reflections on all of that, Karie. I really appreciate you taking time to be here with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and fun conversation. Thanks for letting me share some of my mistakes. I like to learn from other people's mistakes, so more fun to learn from others than from your own. So I hope that this has helped some people to benefit from mine today.
Yeah. And not to put your own words back in your mouth, but hopefully it seems like it gave you some life. It doesn't seem like it sucked the life out of you here, like 1,000 mosquitoes in the Zoom call.
No, this was a great experience. Thank you so much.
Well, sure thing. So again, our guest, thank you to Karie Kaufmann. You can learn more about her and her work, kariekaufmann.com. Look for the link in the show notes. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mark.